Welcome back to our channel, Just Immigration News. Dignity Act of Explained, U.S. Immigration Reform. Please remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss future updates. A major immigration bill introduced just days ago is already stirring intense debate across Washington. It's ambitious, complex, and potentially transformative. Today, we're breaking it all down clearly, honestly, and without the noise so you understand exactly what's on the table. This proposal is known as the Dignity Act, and if passed, it could reshape the U.S. immigration system from top to bottom. What is the Dignity Act? The Dignity Act is a bipartisan immigration proposal, originally introduced in late 2022 and now reintroduced in 2025. Supporters describe it as the long-overdue fix to a broken system. Critics argue it could unintentionally incentivize more undocumented migration. Regardless of where you stand, one thing is clear: this bill touches nearly every corner of immigration policy: border security, asylum reform, dreamers, undocumented immigrants, workers, and legal immigration channels. Ending illegal immigration through structure, not chaos. The first core goal of the Dignity Act is to address illegal immigration decisively. The logic is straightforward. If there is a clear, regulated pathway for long-term undocumented residents to gain legal status, the incentive for future illegal crossings diminishes. The bill pairs legalization with strict enforcement, aiming to close loopholes while restoring order. Border security and enforcement measures. Under the Dignity Act, border security receives significant investment. This includes expanded physical barriers, advanced surveillance technology, and increased staffing. The Department of Homeland Security would be required to achieve full operational control of the border. Air and marine patrol operations would also be expanded, creating a layered enforcement strategy rather than reliance on walls alone. One of the most impactful changes is mandatory nationwide e-verify. Every employer in the United States would be required to verify work authorization. Employers who knowingly hire undocumented workers would face increased penalties, reinforcing accountability on both sides of the labor market. Asylum system reform. Speed, order, and accountability. The asylum system would undergo a major overhaul. The bill proposes 3 government-run humanitarian campuses where asylum seekers would be processed. Initial screenings would be completed within 15 days, and cases adjudicated within 2 months by trained asylum officers rather than immigration judges. Medical care and legal access would be guaranteed. However, enforcement is firm. Individuals caught crossing the border illegally more than once would face expedited removal. Additionally, asylum screening centers would be established in Latin America, allowing applicants to begin the process before ever reaching U.S. soil. Legal status for dreamers and long-term undocumented residents. Dreamers receive one of the clearest pathways under this bill. Eligible individuals, those who arrived before age 18, have lived continuously in the U.S. since January 1, 2021, and have no serious criminal record would qualify for a 10-year path to permanent residence. For undocumented immigrants more broadly, the Dignity Program creates a 7-year legal status for those present in the U.S. since December 31, 2020. This is not a green card and not citizenship. Participants must pay taxes, pass background checks, pay a $7,000 fine, and check in with the government every 2 years. Federal benefits are not included. Investing in American workers without taxpayer burden. A defining feature of the Dignity Act is its link between legalization and economic investment. Immigrants participating in the program would fund an American worker fund, not taxpayers. The $7,000 fines and a 1% wage levy would generate an estimated $70 billion for job training, apprenticeships, and workforce development for U.S. citizens. Modernizing legal immigration for families and workers. The bill also modernizes legal immigration channels. Family-based immigration would become more flexible, reducing long backlogs. A new 90-day family visit visa would allow relatives to attend weddings, funerals, and special events without immigrant intent penalties. Employment-based reforms include fast-tracked work authorization for STEM PhD graduates, higher per-country visa caps, and counting only principal applicants toward visa limits. Long-waiting applicants, especially from India and China, could pay $20,000 to accelerate green card processing. The bill also includes protections against children aging out and establishes a new agency to streamline immigration processing. Will the Dignity Act pass? In its current form? Probably not. But pieces of it almost certainly will. The Dignity Act offers a blueprint, one that blends enforcement, compassion, economics, and modernization. Whether Congress adopts it fully or in fragments, this proposal signals where the future of U.S. immigration policy is headed. Dignity Act of 2025 and what scrapping intent to leave could mean for international students. For decades, the most awkward moment in an F-1 visa interview has not been about grades, universities, or finances. It has been the question no one answers honestly: what will you do after your studies? The correct response, students know, is to talk about returning home, even when the system itself quietly channels them towards optional practical training, employer sponsorship, and long-term work visas. This contradiction is baked into U.S. immigration law through the intent to leave requirement, a rule that presumes every student applicant is a potential immigrant unless they prove otherwise. Now, a bipartisan immigration bill, the Dignity Act of 2025, is proposing to dismantle that legal fiction for F-1 students. If it succeeds, it could redraw one of the most misunderstood fault lines in the U.S. student visa system: the problem no one names, intent to leave, and the reality of student migration. Under current U.S. law, F-1 student visas are governed by Section 214(b) of the Immigration and Nationality Act. The provision assumes that all non-immigrant visa applicants secretly intend to immigrate unless they can prove strong ties to their home country. For international students, this translates into an unusual burden. At the visa window, they are required to demonstrate that they will not want what the system later encourages them to pursue: work experience, skill retention, and, potentially, legal long-term stay. Consular officers evaluate ties through a narrow lens: property ownership, family location, career certainty. These markers that often disadvantage younger applicants from mobile, globalized families. It is why academically sound, fully funded students are frequently refused visas under a single line: failure to establish non-immigrant intent. Over time, this has turned the F-1 interview into a test of narrative discipline rather than educational merit. What the Dignity Act of 2025 is really trying to fix. Introduced in the U.S. House of Representatives in July 2025, the Dignity Act is not primarily a student visa reform bill. It is a sweeping immigration package that attempts an old Washington balancing act: tougher enforcement paired with regulated legal pathways. Its headline components include temporary legal status for certain undocumented immigrants, expanded border security, reforms to green card backlogs, and stricter employment verification. Embedded within this broader framework is a quieter, but consequential, proposal removing the intent to leave requirement for F-1 students. In effect, the bill acknowledges a basic reality policymakers have long avoided: modern international education is no longer a short-term cultural exchange. It is a feeder system for global labor markets, research ecosystems, and innovation pipelines. By eliminating the requirement for students to prove they will leave, the Act would move F-1 visas closer to a dual-intent framework similar to H-1B or L-1 visas, where applicants are allowed to study and legally aspire to long-term opportunities, subject to separate approvals. Why this matters more than it sounds. Scrapping intent to leave would not make the F-1 visa easier in every sense. Students would still need to prove academic preparedness, financial capacity, and genuine educational purpose. Fraud checks, security vetting, and institutional scrutiny would remain intact. But it would fundamentally change the tone of the process. First, it would reduce the subjectivity that currently dominates visa decisions. Officers would no longer need to guess whether a 20-year-old truly plans to return home in 5 years, a prediction no one can make honestly. Second, it would allow students to speak candidly about legal post-study pathways like OPT without fearing automatic rejection. The current system penalizes honesty while rewarding carefully scripted answers. Third, it would recalibrate U.S. competitiveness. As countries like Canada, Australia, and the UK openly design post-study work routes to retain talent, the US has continued to rely on a rule that treats ambition as concealment. The uncomfortable trade-off students must still watch for. There is, however, a parallel policy conversation unfolding alongside the Dignity Act, and it complicates the picture. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security has been exploring changes to how long students are allowed to stay in the U.S. under F-1 status, potentially replacing the traditional duration of status model with fixed-term admissions. For students in PhD programs or research-intensive degrees, this could introduce new layers of administrative uncertainty. In other words, while Congress debates making visa intent more realistic, regulators may simultaneously make visa maintenance more procedural. For students, the benefit of honesty at entry could come with higher compliance demands later. Where the bill stands and what students should realistically expect. As of now, the Dignity Act remains a proposal. It must survive committee scrutiny, pass both chambers of Congress, and avoid being diluted by electoral politics, a steep climb for any comprehensive immigration reform. For current and near-term applicants, nothing changes yet. The intent to leave rule still applies. Visa officers continue to operate under existing law. Students must still demonstrate non-immigrant intent, however artificial that performance may feel. But the introduction of this clause signals something important. Policymakers are finally acknowledging that the language of student visas has lagged behind the economics of education. Why this shift, if it happens, is long overdue. For years, the U.S. has depended on international students while pretending they are temporary guests with no future stake in the country. The Dignity Act challenges that contradiction, not by promising students permanent residency, but by allowing them to be truthful. Education migration has always been about possibilities, not guarantees. Removing the intent to leave requirement does not change outcomes, it changes honesty. And in a system strained by distrust, that alone would be a meaningful reform. That's it for today's video. What do you think about this topic? Thank you for watching all the way to the end. We hope you found this information helpful. We'll see you in the next video. Until then, take care.